Good morning, welcome to Immigration Wednesdays. I'm the attorney Jeff Peak. Today we're going to talk about something that happened with a client that came in from a counsel, and I thought it might help you if you might think you're eligible or know somebody's eligible for a U visa or a T visa. What is a U visa and a T visa? Well, in immigration law, there's visas given to people who are victims of crime. The U visa, typically, they're violent crimes, usually felonies. There's a list of about 20 crimes that you can check online at uscis.gov. Or just type in U visa eligible crimes and it'll show up. Of course, you got the serious ones: aggravated assault, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, rape, attempted murder. The only misdemeanor really that is on that list, in Texas anyways, is domestic violence. So generally when I tell people if they qualify as a victim of a violent crime, usually if you're a victim of a violent crime, it's probably in that list. And then the other side is the T visa, and that's a very uncommon used visa by most immigrants. If you talk to most immigration lawyers, very few have actually done a T visa, because not that there's not a lot of victims of trafficking, and that's what the T stands for, trafficking, but there's a very specific kind of trafficking that they're looking at. They're looking at trafficking for people for sexual purposes or for labor abuses, right? Almost like involuntary servitude or slavery kind of situations, which obviously are not that common, or at least you don't see about them every day. I'm not saying they don't happen. And so you have to be a victim of one of those. That's the first step. And the second step is you have to cooperate with the authorities, and usually that means report it. So what happens in the case of this individual who came and see me this past week was that he had paid for a coyote to bring him across. He came across, but then once he got across, they kind of kept him in this house, basically kidnapped him for a little while, demanding more money from the family, forcing him to cook for them and work for them while they had him in his house, not letting him go. And then eventually, 2 weeks later, he was let go, but there was a period of 2 weeks where they didn't know what was going to happen. They were asking the family for more money. And so he didn't report it. He didn't call the police. And understandably, right? You don't want to report that, you had paid to be yourself smuggled in the United States, and then your smugglers started taking advantage of you. So 10 years later, talks to a lawyer. Lawyer's like, hey, you sounds like you were trafficked. Well, let's stop right there. Okay, first of all, even if he was trafficked, let's say it was a true trafficking situation, did he report it to the police? Did he report to the authorities? No, he didn't. And what this attorney tried to do is say, well, let's report it now. Let's go back here 10 years after the fact. And instead of reporting to the authorities like the police or the FBI or somebody, we're going to call the Department of Labor and treat it like a workforce abuse or something like that. That strategy was never going to work. And had he talked to multiple lawyers, he could have been informed that is not a good strategy. You're not going to get approved. Instead, he spent $10,000 and 2 years in this process, thinking at the end of it he was going to hopefully get approved, and of course he got denied. Another thing is very important, that immigration typically does not view situations where you are paying for your own smuggling into the United States, your own being trafficked as an undocumented immigrant in the United States, as a visa of trafficking situation. Okay, they're going to basically say you were complicit in that, you sought out these people, you paid them. If it didn't work out for you one way or the other, we feel sorry for you. And that doesn't mean they won't investigate a crime, but to give you a T visa because of that, they're probably not going to do that. I think very limited, rare circumstances, unless you were sexually abused or somehow it turned into some horrible other situation. Simply demanding more money from your family to release you is not going to qualify you for the T visa. And of course, that was explained to him in the rejection letter. And in a very just dishonest and bothersome action taken by this attorney is then they wanted to charge him for the appeal. $7,000, which of course that appeal was never going to get approved. And so it's just, you hate to see people taking advantage of like that. This poor guy obviously doesn't know immigration law. He's trusting these attorneys, and they're giving him horrible advice, charging him almost $20,000 over a period of several years for something that was never going to be successful. And so it's important to know the law, and obviously if you're not a lawyer, nobody expects you to learn the law. So what's the best thing you can do to protect yourself? That's really the question. And the answer is get multiple opinions. Okay? I think sometimes some of us, and I'm guilty of this too, I'll go to a doctor and the doctor says, well, you need this procedure or you need this treatment. And you just automatically want to trust the doctor. He's a professional. Why would he lie to me? Why would he tell me? But sometimes people don't know. Sometimes they're recommending things that they think, but it's not true. And it's always good to have multiple opinions. Go to a second opinion from a doctor, right? Especially in the more serious what's the recommendation, like if it's surgery, the more you need to go get opinions. The more, on the flip side for immigration law, I'd say the more costly the process, if you're gonna spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, yeah, it's worth it to go to several consults, even if you're paying for those consults, even if you're paying $100 or $200 for the consult, it'd be worth it to save yourself, spend $100 to save yourself $20,000. That's probably a good piece of advice, And so and how do you know to choose from? Well, you can always look for people who have lots of years experience. You can look online, obviously Google reviews, maybe somewhat of a sense of, at least to know if there's a lot of bad reviews, there might be some issues. Maybe go to a board certified expert who obviously has been approved by the state at a higher level of knowledge and experience than just a regular immigration law practitioner. Those are some of the things. Call a friend who maybe used a lawyer and see if they have somebody they can refer you to. That's also a good idea. But just try to avoid putting yourself in a situation where you're all in, lots of money, one lawyer, and you've never asked a second opinion to see if that's accurate. Because unfortunately, I wish I could say all lawyers were great and honest and going to deliver you, not take your money even when you can't win, but that's just not the case, okay? And especially, I gotta be honest with you, having practiced in immigration law 20 years, immigration law tends to attract certain kinds of lawyers because you're speaking in foreign language, because you're dealing with people who aren't familiar with the laws of the United States. They're just ripe for abuse. And unfortunately, there's certain characters who probably shouldn't be lawyers, probably should be in prison, but are attracted to that kind of environment where they can get by fooling people. And so it's unfortunate, but I just wanted to give you that piece of advice. Again, U visa, T visa, very important that you're a victim, 1. 2, you report to the police. Doesn't matter if you wait to apply for the U or the T visa after a little bit of time, but it's very important that you try to report that as close to the actual incident of the crime as possible, because that's going to allow the authorities to make arrests and make charges, and then you have the chance to cooperate with the prosecutors. And then you'll have to demonstrate how you suffered. And obviously in true victim cases, that's usually not hard to do. So, and then once you win the U visa or T visa, that puts you in a position to be able to get a work permit for 4 years and eventually apply for residency. So it's a great avenue for some people who may not otherwise have a way to get it. And remember, if you are married to a United States citizen or a permanent resident, you don't have to report the violence. That's the one exception. That's called VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. It's a little distinct. It's different than the U visa and T visa in that you have to have been a victim, but you don't have to report to the police. But you do have to have evidence. And obviously, if you do report to the police, that's great evidence. So, but it's not the only evidence. You might have a protective order. You might have other things, medical records and statements and observations from family and friends. So, anyways, that's just a little bit of information to help you avoid unscrupulous lawyers and people trying to take advantage of you. I hope it helps. If you have any questions, if you think you might be eligible for a U visa or VAWA or a T visa even, give us a call here. We'd love to help you out and investigate those options. Have a great week. We'll see you next Wednesday.